This is my Aston Martin DB9. Actually, wait one sec. This is my Aston Martin DB9 split into two. And that's because I've been following a not so easy workshop manual 50-step process to separate the body from the chassis. And that's because I need to get to that engine, which is, well, it's seized at the minute. And I used to think it was because it was flooded, but I'm now actually beginning to think this car has a bit of a shady past and we need to get it back on the right track. So far, I've looked around the interior, it was bone dry. I then drained all the fluids and there was no sign of any water. It was a similar story in the engine cylinders, they were completely dry too, but I could see it thrown a piston. And so this got me thinking. So what do I think happened here? Well, to be honest, I'm not normally one for conspiracy theories, but I think it adds up here. I've got a feeling that the engine's just blown and the previous owner just hasn't wanted to pay that repair bill and thought, you know what, if I just push this in some water, claim it on insurance and be done with it. That's what I think's happened basically. So to Mr. John over here, nutty. But on a serious note, this car has come into good hands because no matter what it takes, I'm determined to get this car back on the road with your help. In the last video, the amount of support you all showed me was incredible and it's really spurred me to just keep going on this. So thank you for that. And yeah, I guess we're just going to start separating the engine now from the rest of this chassis subframe. So let's go. The first steps are to remove the heat shield from the torque tube so I can get access to the bolts connecting the exhaust manifolds to the cats. Obviously, step one being to remove the exhaust manifold from the catalyst, or the cat, is, yeah, these bolts are just insanely tough. And obviously, I've got the two up here done now, but there's one around the back. So what I've done off camera is I've used a forklift and I propped one end up at a time, sort of forklift around there, lift up, move the pallet back, come around here, repeat. So basically, I've managed to actually get myself a bit of a gap now, so I should be able to lie in there and get some action on that and try and get that final one off. But step one has proven to be quite tough, but it's definitely too late to go back now. So yeah, let's crack on. Well, I've seemed to have finally got it. And I've basically had to use, I think it's called a 12 head on it because it just kept trying to round off. And then I've basically had to put all my force behind this with this sort of locked into position against the actual, the cat, or the sort of part of the exhaust. And then I've managed to lever this, hooking this over the end and just pulling it towards me. But yeah, it's absolutely churning up my hands, but I think I've got it now. And sure enough, I did get it this time around, but it really fought me on this one. Sod that. Well, my thinking is hopefully this was the more difficult side because I think these are transmission coolant pipes. I think it just made access a bit more difficult, but hopefully we don't have the same issue on the other side. So hopefully I can just get at those bolts a lot more easily. Thankfully, I was right. The other side proved to be no issue and the 3 bolts came out okay. I can then move on to steps 2 and 3, which are to remove the hoses shown in the diagram, as well as the AC line connecting to the engine. Okay, so in the manual it only says to remove one pipe, or it just doesn't say pipes. And to be honest, this one, as you can see, just stays with the chassis, with the suspension and the subframe. So that, I just don't see the point in undoing. And this looks like it does feed round towards the engine. So what I've done, just to keep it out of the way, to make sure it doesn't snag, is I've just zip tied it to this part. I think it's was it a fuel line, was it? I'm testing my memory now, maybe a coolant pipe, I can't remember, but anyway, zip lined it together. So yeah, that just stop it from snagging, so next task. Right, the next step says to remove the hose from the header tank, and I've just been having a bit of a think about this one. So it says remove the hose from the header tank, which is this one, which as you can see, I have actually disconnected previously. But again, this is all going to stay with the engine, including this, and including this. If you follow this around, it basically comes to this point here, which is loose, and I can just dangle that on the engine for now. So I think I can skip that step. Oh, I've got it on there. I think that should be it off. First time I've been able to use this. Nice. Woo! I'm just tucking it there so it's out the way. And then this one I'm just going to wrap around here. Actually, I should be able to remove the whole thing, should I? No, I can't. So I'm just going to try and tuck them out the way under here. There we go. That should keep it out the way. So, now just to find the alternator, which obviously wasn't hard to find as the alternator has a pulley on the alternator belt. I then just taped it to the chassis so it wouldn't snag on the engine. Okay, well, you join me on day 2 now, and well, not too much has changed. I started trying to feed the straps around, and I basically found that I think from the power steering fluid, some of these pipes have to come off, including this one that I'm just draining out now. I've already drained out one pipe, which was this one here. No, sorry, the one with the paper towels in, just to stop it dripping. But yeah, basically sort of working my way around, trying to figure out what has to come off. I think I'd still need to check that side, but down here is going to be a bit of an interesting one. If I get the flash on, you'll see I've sort of tried to run the starters out. I tried to turn, where is it? This bit I tried to actually take out because it seems like it's sort of getting in the way of some of the wires down there. If you can see this wire and this wire, it sort of goes either way into some plugs, and I can't seem to get those plugs out. That's one plug down there. So yeah, hopefully I'm thinking because I'm lifting up, it might not make a difference, but I do think somehow this harness needs unplugging. So I'm gonna have to figure out how I'm gonna get down there because I'm just struggling with it at the minute. But you can just see plug right there. So I'm pretty confident if I can just get the one plug out that's connected to the engine and keep the rest with the car, I say car, with with half a car, then yeah, I think we'll be okay. And then I think that's this side done. I've got a feeling I'm done on that other side. This AC line is just the one thing I'm not sure about, to be honest. Whether, you know, I've got it zip tied for now, but I might have to undo that. But I'll keep an eye on that basically as I'm lifting it. But yeah, once I've got that plug out, we can get this forklift into position and then we can try and lift this engine out. But actually, that reminds me, there are 2 bolts, I believe, underneath the engine, bolting it in. So it might be that I actually have to lift up the engine a little bit, get some wood underneath this block here, and just be able to get an angle to get those bolts out. But yeah, we'll see, I guess. That's it's not going to be a fun one. I might be able to get through it with a pallet if I just lift one pallet up. Who knows? So we're getting pretty close to showtime at this point, and it's time to get the forklift in position, which will serve as a hoist, and then strapping the engine to it. All right, so the next bit's going to prove to be quite difficult because the next mount, or the sort of engine mount nuts, you see this sort of bit of black bit in the distance and that silver bit on top of it, where my finger is, the bolt goes up into that. So yeah, bit sketchy this bit's going to be, I think. I think I'm going to try and lift it up a little bit just so I get some blocks under it, and then once I can do that, I think hopefully I should be able to undo the bolts. But this bit is probably a bit sketchy and not helped by the fact I put cardboard down. Whilst it does protect everything it's sitting on, does mean I can't really access it from underneath. But yeah, this could take a while to try and figure out the proper process, but I say proper process, the way to make it safe. But yeah, let's give it a go. Lifting up the engine worked perfectly. It's enabled me to get the blocks under the subframe so I could safely remove the engine mount bolts.
those out, I tried to lift the engine, but as you can see, the torque tube is still lifting up with it. It turned out I'd missed a bolt that's hidden away behind the transmission lines, but once I got that out, I could use a crowbar to lever the torque tube away from the engine. On the side of the engine, the transmission lines are bolted to the engine. I could only see a couple of these, and it turns out I missed one.
And now it's suspended. It's very hard to lever off, so I'm actually just going to try and disconnect the pipes down here. Well, that's taken me ages, but we have the hoses off. So now we should be able to finally lift this engine out, all being well. So let's give it a go. Well, that is actually crazy. We've actually got the engine out of the car. It took blooming ages, and it turned out I disconnected that. Where was it? There was, oh no, we're on the wrong side of the engine now, aren't we? The cooling lines down, the sort of transmission cooling lines, it turned out I missed one bolt, and that was causing the issue. The rest were fine, so there was actually one bolt I had to undo, but then it just came straight off. But yeah, I have subsequently bent them, so they will need changing over. But for now, I'm just gonna enjoy this a little bit because this has not been easy. The manual workshop for actually taking the engine out was useless, no diagrams, nothing. And I'm no mechanic, but this is pretty close, I'd say. Not many people can do this. Remove a V12 Aston Martin DB9 from the car by splitting the body off and then getting the engine out by disconnecting it from the torque tube. I mean, it's been a hell of a lot of work. But yeah, I'm just gonna sit and relish this and just sort of enjoy this for a sec. All right, well, these are the transmission coolant lines that are no good. As you can see over here, we've got a kink, and over there we've got a kink, which is basically the bracket that I didn't realize was still attached. So yeah, now it's sort of making a lot more sense. It's a bit annoying because it's not actually in the manual workshop to disconnect these lines. So, you know, I didn't really know even how many there were or anything like that. I assumed there would be 2. Turns out there's 3. So if you're doing this at home, make sure you get all of them. Don't just do 2. But other than that, it actually kind of came out relatively smoothly in the end. I think, well, let's run into it. Everything down here seemed absolutely fine in the end. Obviously, we took this line off. Which one was it? This one here, because that stays with it. And obviously the other end's gone now with the engine. So we were correct to disconnect that. The worst bit was, to be honest, just trying to get that torque tube back. As you can see with the pallets here, I've got it sitting either side of this, whatever you call it, ramp. So yeah, the torque tube I couldn't push back. I had to try and bring the engine out. And obviously I missed one bolt. If you look under here, there's 3 there. I'd forgotten that one, which was by the coolant line, or the transmission line, sorry. So I missed that. Once I got that out, I was able to sort of pry it with a crowbar. So all in all, it actually went okay. Not looking forward to try and get it back in here, but that's definitely a problem for another day, because for now we've got the engine out, so we can actually start rebuilding it. And to be honest, I think by the time we've rebuilt the engine, I think, you know, I'll be so motivated to just want to get it back in the car by then that I'll be kind of looking forward to this stage, I think. But for now, I'm just glad to get the engine out and we can move on.
So with the engine strapped down securely, I called it for the night.
All right, so new week here now. I've been trying to source an engine stand, but I just can't seem to. Not one that would arrive for at least a week anyway. And I kind of want to just get cracking on this. So for now, and whilst I'm still trying to source the engine stand, I'm just going to start trying to take off the top end, removing all the ancillaries, the wiring, the belt down here, etc., etc. So yeah, enough talking, let's just jump into it.
I started by trying to remove the thermostat housing, but even with the bolts off, I just couldn't seem to get it to budge. I therefore decided to leave it for now and focus on removing the alternator belt and all the pulleys. I'm labeling up all the pulleys as I take them off just so I can put them back in the correct position when I'm reassembling the engine down the line. I can now turn my attention to the rear of the engine, and I want to get this wiring harness out of the way first. Just look how convoluted this harness is, and suddenly the engine itself doesn't look so intimidating.
Okay, that's gone surprisingly okay, which I'm actually quite surprised at. Weirdly, I didn't think this harness would all stay as one, but it does. That's perfect, because that's going to be so much easier to put back together, not having to remember how things are lined up, and I've got a lot of it all connected into each other, no problem. And the reason I didn't film me sort of stripping down that far side here, and you sort of just saw me start on here, was just because I was trying to take as many photos as possible. Whilst videos are okay to watch back, photos you can just be a bit more specific. I can point at things that I'm looking at, etc., etc. I don't risk standing in the way or anything like that, so there's just going to be no issues putting this back together, hopefully. But there's now one thing I'm dying to do, and I'm sure you're dying to see it there at home as well, is to take this cover off, and let's just see how much we can see down into the engine and see if we can figure out what's causing the issue, and see if we can locate that piston that's gone MIA.
So I'm starting off removing the cam covers just so I can see how the top end of the engine looked. Naturally, I'm starting on the side with the thrown piston, and we are really getting into uncharted territory for me now, which is beyond scary. I really mean it when I say I've never done anything like this before, but from what little I know, the top end seems to be okay. I got the borescope down the cylinder again, and this time I was able to get a bit of a better look. I believe I can see a bent and broken rod with 1,000 small fragments of what used to be the piston. Seeing all this spurred me on to get this engine apart, as I still felt like I couldn't get the answer I'm looking for, which is whether the crankshaft is okay or not. Sadly, my money is on it being broken.
Okay, well, I will be the first to admit I don't really know too much what I'm looking at here. I'm very inexperienced, but camshafts are fine. Timing belts are fine. All our valves seem absolutely fine, and the springs, which some you can just see down the bottom there. Everything this end looks absolutely fine to me. It might just need a bit of a clean up in sort of areas, but on the whole, looks fine. All right, well, it's the next day here now, and I have said engine stand. Went down to Portsmouth to collect it. Absolutely fine. It's a heavy duty one. Should hold a lot more than this engine weighs, so that's good. And yeah, it's time to start looking into it, but you're gonna have to wait for next time for that. So if you've liked this episode, hit that thumbs up button down below, because it'll really help me to grow this channel. I'll be most appreciative. And also, if you're not subscribed already and you want to watch me dissect this engine and see how many fragments of piston I can get out, then obviously hit that red button down below. But yeah, new episode coming out next week, and I'll see you then. Cheers now, bye bye.